A millionaire let a homeless black woman shower in his mansion and was shocked when he saw her true beauty. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from. Rain crashed against the windows of Sebastian Hale's office on the very top floor of Hale Industries. Lightning flashed across the night sky, lighting up his serious face as he looked down at the city. Sebastian was 45 years old and had everything money could buy: his own company, a huge house on a hill, fancy cars, and a name that made people both respect and fear him. "Mr. Hale," his assistant Margaret called from the door, "it's almost midnight. Maybe you should go home." Sebastian didn't look away from his work. "I still have things to do." "You always have work to do," Margaret said with a sigh. She had been his assistant for 15 years and was one of the few people who could speak honestly to him. The storm is getting worse. The weather service has sent out warnings." Sebastian looked at the pile of papers on his desk. "Fine. I'll finish these at home." The drive to his mansion took longer than usual because of the heavy rain. His driver, Frank, drove slowly, making sure the car didn't slip on the wet roads. Sebastian sat in the back seat, reading documents on his tablet. But when they reached the gate of his house, something outside caught his eye. "Stop the car," Sebastian ordered. Frank hit the brakes. "Is something wrong, sir?" Sebastian squinted through the rain-streaked window. Near the stone wall that surrounded his home, a small figure was curled up under a big oak tree. It was a person, someone hiding from the storm. "Wait here," Sebastian said. He grabbed an umbrella and stepped out into the rain. His expensive shoes got wet right away as he walked toward the tree. As he got closer, he saw that the figure was a woman. She wore a large, torn coat that swallowed her small body. Her head was down and her dark, wet hair covered her face. "You can't stay here," Sebastian said loudly over the sound of the rain. The woman looked up, surprised. Even though she was dirty and wet, there was something strong and calm in her tired eyes. "I'm sorry," she said in a clear and polite voice. "I'll leave." She tried to stand, but she stumbled. Without thinking, Sebastian reached out and caught her. She was lighter than he expected, and she was shivering from the cold. "Where are you going to go in this weather?" he asked. She looked away. "I'll find somewhere." Sebastian didn't know why, but he made a decision that was very unlike him. "Come with me." The woman hesitated. She looked unsure and a little scared. "Look," Sebastian said, feeling impatient. "I'm just offering you a warm place to stay for the night. Food, dry clothes, that's all." After a moment, she nodded and followed him to the car. Frank's eyes widened in surprise when he saw them, but he quickly hid his reaction and opened the door. The woman hesitated before getting in, clearly embarrassed about being wet and dirty in such a fancy car. "Take us home, Frank," Sebastian said. The rest of the short drive was silent. When they reached the mansion, the woman stared at the huge house through the car window. Her expression was unreadable. Inside, Mrs. Collins, the housekeeper, was waiting. "Mr. Hale, we were starting to worry because of the storm," she said. She stopped when she noticed the woman behind him. "Mrs. Collins, please prepare a guest room," Sebastian said, "and find some dry clothes." "Of course, sir," she said quickly. She had worked for Sebastian long enough to know not to ask too many questions. Turning to the woman, Sebastian pointed to the grand staircase. "You can take a shower and change. Mrs. Collins will help you." "Why are you doing this?" the woman asked in a soft voice. Sebastian frowned. He wasn't sure himself. "Think of it as an act of kindness, nothing more." As Mrs. Collins led the woman upstairs, Sebastian went to his study and poured himself a glass of scotch. He tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept drifting to the stranger upstairs. What had made him bring a homeless woman into his home? It was not like him at all. An hour later, a soft knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Mrs. Collins entered with a tray of food. "I thought you might be hungry, sir. Your guest is settled in. She's in the blue room." "Thank you. How is she?" "Clean and in fresh clothes, sir. She didn't say much, but she was very polite." Mrs. Collins hesitated. Sir, if I may ask, is everything okay? Everything is fine, Sebastian said. You can go home now. The storm is letting up. After she left, Sebastian decided to check on his unexpected guest. He told himself it was just to make sure she hadn't stolen anything, but deep down, he knew that wasn't the real reason. He knocked on the door of the blue room. No answer. He knocked again, louder this time. Come in, a soft voice called. Sebastian opened the door and stopped in his tracks. The woman standing by the window looked completely different. Her dark hair was now clean and dry, falling in soft waves around her shoulders. Without the dirt, her face showed high cheekbones, full lips, and those same deep eyes that had caught his attention before. She wore a simple white blouse and black pants that were a bit too big for her, but they still couldn't hide her graceful figure. For the first time in years, Sebastian Hale was speechless. Thank you for your kindness, she said. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stopped. Sebastian cleared his throat. Are you comfortable? Do you need anything else? No, this is more than I could have hoped for. She looked around at the elegant room with its big four-poster bed and fancy furniture. It's been a long time since I slept somewhere this nice. You look different, Sebastian said bluntly. A small smile appeared on her lips. Amazing what soap and clean clothes can do. What's your name? He asked. She hesitated, then said, Isabella Cruz. How did you end up on the streets, Isabella Cruz? She sat on the bed, her posture stiff. It's a long story. I have time, Sebastian said, surprising himself. Sometimes life doesn't go as planned, Isabella said. One day you have everything, the next day it's all gone. Something about her voice told him that she was not an ordinary homeless woman. You're not what I expected, Sebastian admitted. What did you expect? She asked. I don't know. Not you. They locked eyes for a moment. Sebastian felt something strange, something he hadn't felt in years. A loud crash of thunder made Isabella jump, breaking the moment. You're safe here, Sebastian found himself saying. Get some rest. We'll talk in the morning. As he left the room, Isabella called after him. Mr. Hale, why did you really help me tonight? Sebastian paused. I don't know, he admitted. Good night, Isabella. He closed the door, his mind racing. Who was this woman, and why did he feel so drawn to her? The next morning, Sebastian woke up earlier than usual. After a quick shower and changing his clothes, he went downstairs. He thought maybe Isabella had left in the middle of the night, but instead, he found her in the kitchen talking to Mrs. Collins. Good morning, Mr. Hale, Mrs. Collins said. Would you like your usual breakfast? Yes, thank you, Sebastian said, looking at Isabella. In the morning light, she looked even more beautiful. The clothes Mrs. Collins gave her fit better today. She was wearing a simple blue dress that matched the color of her eyes. I hope you slept well, Sebastian said as he sat down. Better than I have in months, Isabella admitted. Thank you again for letting me stay. Mr. Hale rarely brings guests home, Mrs. Collins said while making coffee. Sebastian gave her a warning look, but she just smiled. I won't stay any longer than necessary, Isabella said. After breakfast, I'll leave. Where will you go? Sebastian asked. Isabella looked down at her hands. I'll figure something out. I always do. Sebastian felt strange about letting her leave. He didn't want her to go. Actually, I need some help around here. Mrs. Collins has been saying she needs an assistant. Mrs. Collins almost dropped the coffee pot. I have? Yes, Sebastian said firmly. Remember our conversation last month? Mrs. Collins, who had worked for Sebastian for a long time, nodded. Oh yes, I remember. An assistant would be very helpful. Isabella looked at both of them. She didn't believe their story. Mr. Hale, I appreciate the offer, but I can't accept charity disguised as a job. It's not charity, Sebastian said. You'd be working for your food, a place to stay, and a salary. He wasn't sure why he wanted her to stay so badly. The thought of her going back to the streets made him uncomfortable. You don't even know me, Isabella pointed out. I'm a good judge of character, Sebastian said. That's how I built my business. Isabella stared at him. What exactly would this job be? Before Sebastian could answer, his phone rang. He looked at the screen and frowned. I have to take this. Think about my offer. We'll talk when I get back. He walked to his office while Mrs. Collins explained the job to Isabella. Sebastian wondered why he was acting so differently. First, he let a stranger stay in his house, and now he was giving her a job. That wasn't like him. The call was from Hugo Whitaker, his chief financial officer. Sebastian, we have a problem. The Peterson deal is falling apart. What? Why? Sebastian asked, his business mind taking over. Someone is leaking our financial problems to them. Now they're using it to change our deal. Sebastian's grip on his phone tightened. Find out who did this. Call a board meeting this afternoon. I'll be there in an hour. When he returned to the kitchen, he saw Isabella helping Mrs. Collins with the dishes. She looked up when he walked in. I have to go to work, Sebastian said. Did you think about my offer? Isabella nodded. If Mrs. Collins really needs help, I'd be happy to do it. Mrs. Collins smiled. I think we'll work well together. Good, then it's settled, Sebastian said. He was surprised by how pleased he felt. I'll be back tonight. We'll talk more then. As he walked toward the door, Isabella followed him. Mr. Hale, she said softly, I want you to know I won't stay longer than I need to. Once I can manage on my own, I'll leave. Something about her words made him feel disappointed. But he nodded. That's your choice. As he drove to his office, Sebastian tried to focus on his business problem. But his mind kept drifting to Isabella. There was something about her, a mystery he wanted to solve. He didn't like mysteries. He liked control and order. Yet this feeling was both strange and exciting. Little did he know, Isabella Cruz had secrets. Secrets that could change everything he had built. The simple act of bringing her into his home had already started something that would change his life forever. 2 weeks passed. Isabella settled into the house. Every morning, she helped Mrs. Collins make breakfast before Sebastian came downstairs. They ate together. He read the newspaper and asked her questions. She always gave short answers or changed the subject. One morning, Sebastian noticed something was wrong. She seemed distracted as she poured his coffee. Are you okay? He asked, folding his newspaper. Isabella smiled, but it didn't look real. Of course. Why wouldn't I be? You seem nervous. Before she could answer, Mrs. Collins walked in. Mr. Hale, Valeria is here to see you. Isabella froze. The coffee pot stayed in her hand, still tilted over Sebastian's cup. Valeria? Sebastian frowned. I wasn't expecting her. The sound of high heels clicking on the floor came before a tall, blonde woman walked into the kitchen. She looked fancy in a designer dress and perfect hair. She walked in like she owned the place. Sebastian, darling, she said, kissing his cheek. Her eyes glanced at Isabella, but she didn't seem to care about her. I've been trying to reach you for days, Valeria said. I've been busy, Sebastian replied, standing up. What do you need? Valeria gave a fake smile. Can't I visit my favorite ex-husband without a reason? Isabella almost dropped the coffee pot. Ex-husband, she thought. Sebastian had never said he was married before. Isabella, Sebastian said, noticing her surprise. This is Valeria Winters, my ex-wife. Valeria turned to Isabella, her eyes sharp. And who is this? The new housekeeper? Isabella is Mrs. Collins' assistant, Sebastian said flatly. Interesting, Valeria said, clearly not believing him. I need to talk to you in private, Sebastian. It's business. Sebastian nodded. We can talk in my office. Then he looked at Isabella. Could you bring us some coffee? Of course, Mr. Hale, Isabella said, even though she felt uneasy. As Sebastian and Valeria left, Isabella noticed Valeria placing her hand on his arm in a way that felt possessive. Well, that was awkward, Mrs. Collins said. Who is she? Isabella asked, trying to sound normal. Mrs. Collins sighed. Valeria Winters. They were married for 3 years. Divorced 4 years ago. She still works at Hale Industries. She looked at Isabella with a knowing expression. They have a complicated history. It's none of my business, Isabella said quickly. Mrs. Collins hummed, not convinced. Isabella was in the kitchen making a tray of coffee. She picked it up and walked to the study room. Before she knocked on the door, she heard loud voices inside. She stopped, not wanting to interrupt an argument. "You can't be serious, Sebastian," Valeria said angrily. "The Whitaker Group is trying to hurt our company, and you're busy helping some random woman from the street?" "Lower your voice," Sebastian said in a cold tone, "and my personal life is not your business anymore." "It is my business when it affects the company, our company." "My company," Sebastian corrected her. "You got your fair share in the divorce." Isabella knocked louder, not wanting to hear more. "Come in," Sebastian called. Isabella entered, keeping her eyes down as she placed the coffee tray on the desk. "Thank you, Isabella," Sebastian said. Valeria looked at Isabella with sharp eyes. "That will be all," she said, like she was ordering her to leave. Isabella felt angry but didn't show it. Instead, she asked Sebastian, "Will there be anything else, Mr. Hale?" Sebastian looked at both women, feeling the tension. "No, thank you, Isabella." As Isabella left, she heard Valeria say, "Really, Sebastian? She's living in your house? What do you even know about her?" Isabella quickly walked away, her heart beating fast. Valeria was right about one thing. Sebastian knew almost nothing about her, and that's how it needed to stay. Later that afternoon, Sebastian found Isabella sitting in the garden, reading a book under a big oak tree. He watched her for a moment, surprised by how natural she looked in his home. "I hope Valeria didn't make you uncomfortable," he said as he walked closer. Isabella looked up and closed her book. "Not at all. She seems protective of you." Sebastian laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. Valeria only protects what belongs to her, nothing more. He sat next to her on the stone bench. "I should have told you about her before. We've been divorced for years, but we still work together." "You don't owe me an explanation, Mr. Hale." "Sebastian," he corrected. "You've been here for 2 weeks. You can call me by my first name." Isabella smiled a little. "Sebastian." The way she said his name made him feel warm inside. They sat in silence for a while before Isabella spoke again. "Valeria seemed worried about your company. She mentioned the Whitaker Group." Sebastian's face darkened. "Hugo Whitaker used to be my friend and business partner when I started Hale Industries. Now he's trying to take my company." He shook his head. "I shouldn't be talking to you about this." "I don't mind," Isabella said softly. "Sometimes it helps to talk." Sebastian looked at her closely. In just 2 weeks, she had become part of his life, yet he knew almost nothing about her. "Isabella," he said slowly, "who are you really?" Her body stiffened, but she kept her face calm. "I told you, I'm just someone who had bad luck." "I don't believe that," Sebastian said. "Your manners, the way you speak, the way you act, you weren't always homeless." Isabella stood up quickly. "We all have pasts we don't want to talk about." Before Sebastian could respond, Frank, his assistant, appeared at the garden entrance. "Mr. Hale, Mr. Reynolds is here to see you." Sebastian frowned. "Javier? He's supposed to be in Europe." A tall man with silver hair and sharp blue eyes walked into the garden. "Sebastian, sorry to show up like this, but I just got back from London and heard the news." "What news?" Sebastian asked as he shook his friend's hand. Javier, Sebastian's lawyer and longtime friend, glanced at Isabella. "Private business matters? Can we talk alone?" "Of course," Isabella said quickly. "I'll help Mrs. Collins with dinner." As she left, she felt Javier's eyes watching her, suspicious and curious. That evening, Isabella sat by her window when a knock came at her door. "Come in," she said, expecting Mrs. Collins. Instead, Sebastian entered, looking troubled. "We need to talk." Isabella's stomach tightened. "About what?" "Javier showed me something today," Sebastian said, "a newspaper article from 6 months ago." Isabella gripped her chair. "Oh?" "It was about the disappearance of a woman named Isabella Blackwood," Sebastian continued. "Wife of a rich man named Gabriel Blackwood. She vanished after her husband was arrested for fraud and money laundering." Isabella felt cold, but she stayed silent. Sebastian pulled out the newspaper and placed it on the table. It had a photo of Isabella at a charity event, dressed in diamonds, standing next to a handsome but dangerous-looking man. "Is this you, Isabella?" Sebastian asked quietly. "Are you Isabella Blackwood?" She was silent for a long time, then took a deep breath. "Yes." Sebastian sat across from her. "Why did you run? Were you part of your husband's crimes?" "No," Isabella said, her voice shaking. "I didn't know anything about what Gabriel was doing until the FBI came to our house. But that didn't matter. The press and his enemies thought I was guilty too." "So you ran." Isabella turned to the window. "After Gabriel was arrested, I started getting threats. Someone thought I knew where he hid money, but I didn't know anything." "Why didn't you go to the police?" Isabella laughed bitterly. "Gabriel had police officers, judges, even FBI agents working for him. I didn't know who to trust." She wrapped her arms around herself. "So I disappeared. I changed my name, dyed my hair, and left everything behind." Sebastian studied her. "And you've been running for 6 months?" Isabella nodded. "I sold my jewelry, stayed in cheap motels, kept moving until that rainy night when you found me." "Why tell me now? Why not keep lying?" Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "Because I'm tired of running, and because I trust you." Sebastian's phone rang. He checked the screen. "It's Javier." Isabella tensed. "Does he know who I am?" "He suspects, but he hasn't told anyone yet. He wanted to talk to me first." Fear filled Isabella's face. "I should leave. I've put you in danger." "No," Sebastian said firmly. "Stay. Let me handle Javier." When Sebastian left, Isabella sat on her bed, thinking. She should run before she brought trouble to Sebastian, but the thought of leaving him hurt in a way she didn't expect. Sebastian returned 20 minutes later. "Javier wants to meet you. He thinks he can help clear your name." "Can he be trusted?" "Javier is my friend," Sebastian said. "He's a good man, even if he's suspicious." Isabella hesitated. "If I stay, I might put you in danger." Sebastian held her hand. "I know how to handle danger." "Why risk it for me?" Sebastian smiled softly. "Because in 2 weeks you've made my house feel like home again." Isabella's heart skipped a beat. "I'll meet with Javier, but after that I have to decide what's best." Sebastian nodded, but she could see in his eyes he had already decided. He wanted her to stay. The next morning, Javier arrived early. He, Sebastian, and Isabella sat in Sebastian's study. Isabella told her story from the beginning. She explained how she met Gabriel Blackwood, how they fell in love quickly and got married. But over time, she realized Gabriel was not the man she thought he was. One day, the FBI came and took him away. "I didn't know he was doing anything bad," Isabella said. "He kept me away from everything. He controlled all our money and always made me believe everything was fine." Javier listened carefully, sometimes writing notes. When Isabella finished, he leaned back in his chair. "I believe you," he said, "and I think I can help clear your name. The FBI is looking for you as a witness, not as someone who did something wrong." Isabella's eyes brightened. "Really?" Javier nodded. "But there's a problem. Someone who worked with Gabriel thinks you know where a lot of stolen money is hidden. That person has been looking for you." Sebastian's face became serious. "Who is it?" Javier took a deep breath. "Hugo Whitaker." Sebastian stood up quickly. "Whitaker? My Whitaker?" Javier nodded. "Yes. It turns out Gabriel secretly gave money to Whitaker's business. When Gabriel was caught, Whitaker lost a lot of money. He thinks you know where the rest is." Isabella's face turned pale. "That's why he wants to take over your company, Sebastian. He must know I'm here." Sebastian started pacing. "But how did he find out?" Isabella suddenly remembered. "Valeria, she saw me yesterday. If she's working with Whitaker, she might have told him." Sebastian frowned. "Valeria wouldn't." Then he stopped. "Actually, she might. She's been trying to get me to merge my company with Whitaker's for a long time." Javier stood up. "We need to act fast. I'll talk to my friend at the FBI and set up a safe meeting for you, Isabella. In the meantime, both of you should be very careful." After Javier left, Sebastian turned to Isabella. I won't let Whitaker hurt you, Isabella sighed. I've dragged you into this mess. Sebastian shook his head. Whitaker was already my problem. Now I just understand why he wants my company so badly. He moved closer to her. We'll face this together. Isabella looked up at him and saw something she hadn't seen in a long time. Someone who truly cared for her. Together, she whispered. Neither of them noticed Mrs. Collins standing by the door, looking worried. She quietly closed the door and hurried away to make a phone call. A call that would change everything. The next morning, Sebastian woke up early. He hadn't slept much. He kept thinking about Isabella's story and Whitaker's connection to Gabriel. He got dressed quickly and went downstairs. To his surprise, Mrs. Collins was already in the kitchen. Good morning, Mrs. Collins. You're up early. She jumped a little. Oh, Mr. Hale. Yes, I couldn't sleep. Sebastian looked at her. Are you okay? Mrs. Collins looked away. Of course, sir. Just worried about all this trouble with Miss Isabella. Sebastian frowned. Mrs. Collins, is there something you're not telling me? Before she could answer, Isabella walked into the kitchen. She looked tired. Good morning, she said softly. Mrs. Collins quickly turned away. Breakfast will be ready in 20 minutes. She left the room quickly. Isabella raised an eyebrow. She seems upset. Yes, Sebastian said, watching the door. She does. He turned back to Isabella. How are you feeling? Isabella gave a small smile. I've been better, but at least I don't have to hide the truth from you anymore. Sebastian took her hand. We'll figure this out. Javier is meeting with the FBI today. Isabella squeezed his hand. Thank you for believing in me. It doesn't matter what your name is, Sebastian said. It matters who you are. Isabella's heart beat faster. She realized how much she cared for Sebastian. The doorbell rang. Frank, the butler, called from the hallway. Mr. Hale, some men are here to see you. They say it's urgent. Sebastian frowned. I'm not expecting anyone. When they walked to the foyer, they saw two serious-looking men in dark suits. Sebastian Heil? The taller man asked, showing a badge. I'm Agent Phillips from the FBI. This is Agent Turner. We're here for Isabella Blackwood. Isabella froze. How did you find me? We received an anonymous tip, Agent Turner said. We need you to come with us. Sebastian stepped forward. My lawyer, Javier, was supposed to arrange a meeting with the FBI today. We don't know anything about that, Agent Phillips said, but we can sort it out at our office. Mrs. Blackwood, get your things. You need to come with us. Sebastian's eyes narrowed. She's not going anywhere until I call Javier. Agent Phillips moved his jacket, showing a gun. This is not a request, Mr. Hale. Don't interfere. Isabella touched Sebastian's arm. It's okay, I'll go. Call Javier and have him meet me there. Sebastian hesitated, then nodded. I won't let anything happen to you. As the agents took Isabella outside, Sebastian saw Mrs. Collins standing in the hallway, looking guilty. His eyes narrowed. It was you, he said coldly. You called the FBI. Mrs. Collins wrung her hands. I was worried about you, sir. Valeria called me yesterday. She said Isabella was dangerous. Sebastian clenched his fists. You've worked for me for 15 years, and you betrayed me because Valeria tricked you? I thought I was protecting you, Mrs. Collins whispered, tears in her eyes. Sebastian walked past her, already dialing Javier. Javier, they took Isabella. What? That's impossible. My FBI contact said they would wait. Javier sounded shocked. A cold feeling ran through Sebastian. What if they weren't real FBI agents? Describe them, Javier said. Sebastian did. Javier was silent for a moment. Then he spoke. My contact says they don't have any agents like that in your area. Sebastian's stomach dropped. Whitaker. It has to be him, Javier said. I'll get the real FBI to your house now. Sebastian rushed to his study, opened his safe, and took out a small gun. Frank, which way did they go? North toward the highway. Sebastian's phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hale, he answered. Hugo Whitaker's voice came through. Looking for something? Sebastian gritted his teeth. Where is she? Safe. For now. You want her back? Sign over your company to me. I want proof she's alive. There was a rustling sound, then Isabella's voice. Sebastian, don't do it. Don't give him your company. Are you satisfied? Whitaker asked. You have 1 hour. The call ended. Sebastian slammed his fist against the car door. Should we call the police, sir? Frank asked. No time, Sebastian said. Take me back home. I need to get those papers. When they arrived, Javier was waiting with another man. Sebastian, this is Agent Martinez, Javier said. The real FBI. The agent stepped forward. Mr. Hale, we think Isabella Blackwood has been taken by Hugo Whitaker's men. We have been trying to catch Whitaker for months. He wants my company in exchange for Isabella's life, Sebastian said. He gave me an hour. Agent Martinez shook his head. We can't let you do that. Whitaker is dangerous. 3 people have already disappeared because they knew too much about his business with Gabriel Blackwood. I'm not letting Isabella be the 4th, Sebastian said firmly. We can set up a plan to catch him, but we need time, Agent Martinez said. We don't have time, Sebastian snapped. His phone buzzed. It was a text message with an address. It was an old warehouse outside of town. That's the place, Sebastian said, showing Agent Martinez. You have 30 minutes to get your team ready. I'm going in, with or without you. Inside the warehouse, Isabella tried to free her hands from the ropes tied to the chair. They were too tight and hurt her wrists when she pulled. The room was dark and cold, with metal walls and a concrete floor. Every sound echoed. Hugo Whitaker walked back and forth, checking his watch. He was tall and thin, with dark hair that had streaks of silver. His cold eyes reminded Isabella of Gabriel. Your boyfriend is taking his time, Whitaker said. Maybe you don't mean as much to him as I thought. He's smarter than you think, Isabella said calmly. He won't just give up his company without knowing you'll let me go. Whitaker smiled in a way that made her shiver. I'm counting on his brains, that's why his company is so successful. He leaned in close. But I'm also counting on his feelings for you. Love makes men do stupid things. He's not in love with me, Isabella said quickly, though her heart beat faster. Whitaker laughed. I've known Sebastian for 20 years. Since his divorce, he never cared about any woman, but now he's risking everything for you. He straightened up. Speaking of his ex-wife, Valeria, she says hello. She helped me with all of this. Isabella's eyes widened. She told Mrs. Collins to call the FBI. She thought they'd come. Whitaker shrugged. But I have better connections. My men got to you first. Just then the door banged open. One of Whitaker's men walked in. Boss, Hale just arrived. He's alone, like you said. Whitaker grinned. Perfect. Bring him in. When Sebastian entered the room, his eyes locked onto Isabella. He looked worried but relieved. Are you hurt? He asked, stepping forward. I'm okay, she said. One of Whitaker's men stopped Sebastian from getting closer. Whitaker stepped between them. How sweet. Did you bring the papers? Sebastian held up a manila envelope. Everything you need to take over Hale Industries, signed and notarized. Hand them over, Whitaker ordered, reaching for the envelope. Sebastian pulled it back. Let Isabella go first. Whitaker's smile disappeared. That's not how this works. Give me the papers now. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then Sebastian slowly extended the envelope. As Whitaker reached for it, the lights went out. The warehouse became completely dark. Glass shattered. People shouted, FBI! Everybody down! A voice boomed over a megaphone. Isabella felt someone cutting the ropes on her wrists. It's me, Sebastian whispered. Can you walk? Yes, she breathed in relief. He helped her up. They moved quickly through the darkness. Behind them, Whitaker was shouting at his men. Gunshots rang out. This way! Sebastian urged, pulling her toward a side exit. Just as they reached the door, a shadow stepped in front of them. It was Valeria Winters. Her face was twisted with anger. She held a small gun pointed at them. Going somewhere? She asked coldly. Valeria, don't do this, Sebastian said, pushing Isabella behind him. Valeria glared. Do you know what I had to do to help set this up? I had to pretend I still wanted you, and then I had to watch you fall for her. I never wanted your money, Isabella said softly, or any of this. Valeria laughed bitterly. Please, you were Gabriel Blackwood's wife. You're just as bad as he was. Valeria, Sebastian said, stepping forward carefully. The FBI is here. It's over. Put the gun down before you make things worse for yourself. Worse? Valeria's hand shook. Do you know what Whitaker promised me? Power. Everything you refused to give me when we were married. I never refused you anything, Sebastian said. You wanted more than I could give. Valeria's eyes narrowed. And now you're giving it all to her? She turned the gun on Isabella. I don't think so. Everything happened fast. Valeria pulled the trigger. Sebastian jumped, pushing the gun up. The bullet hit the ceiling. They struggled. Isabella grabbed a metal pipe and swung it at Valeria's side. Valeria cried out and fell. The gun slid across the floor. Sebastian kicked it away. Come on, he said, pulling Isabella toward the exit. Outside, police lights flashed. Officers shouted orders. Agent Martinez ran toward them. Are you both okay? He asked. We're fine, Sebastian said, holding Isabella close. Whitaker and Valeria are still inside. Both are armed. We'll handle it, Martinez said. Go, get to safety. They walked to Sebastian's car. Isabella suddenly felt weak, her energy drained. Hey, Sebastian said gently, holding her steady. I've got you. Isabella looked up at him. You risked everything for me today. Sebastian smiled. Not everything. The papers I gave Whitaker were fake. Javier's idea. Isabella let out a small laugh. You're amazing. Sebastian's face turned serious. Today I realized something. When I thought I might lose you, these past weeks have changed me. Isabella reached up and touched his face. I feel the same way. They kissed. It felt like home, like a new beginning. 3 months later, snow covered Sebastian's house. Inside, it was warm and cozy. Isabella stood by the window, watching the snowflakes. Hugo Whitaker and Valeria were in jail. Gabriel Blackwood had been sentenced to 20 years. Sebastian came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her. What are you thinking about? Isabella leaned back. How different my life is now. Last Christmas, I was with Gabriel at a big fancy party, but I felt empty. Sebastian kissed her head. And this Christmas? Isabella turned and smiled. I'm exactly where I want to be, with the person I want to be with. They decorated the tree together. Sebastian asked about her family. My parents died when I was in college, Isabella said. I was an only child. Holidays weren't special after that. Sebastian held her hand. I'm sorry. It's okay, she said. It was a long time ago, and then I met Gabriel. He became my world until I realized. You deserve better, he said softly. You deserve someone who sees how strong and kind you are. Isabella looked at him. Someone like you? She asked gently. Sebastian didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, soft box. Isabella's heart started beating fast. I wanted to do this on Christmas Eve, Sebastian admitted, looking nervous. I had everything planned. Dinner, champagne, everything. But now, talking about family and traditions, I don't want to wait any longer. He opened the box, revealing a beautiful diamond ring. It was simple but elegant. Isabella Cruz or Blackwood, or whatever name you choose, he said, I love you. These months with you have shown me true happiness. Will you marry me? Before Isabella could answer, the doorbell rang. It echoed through the quiet house. Ignore it, Sebastian whispered, his eyes still on her. But the bell rang again, louder this time. Isabella squeezed his hand. It's okay. Whoever it is will go away. But the ringing didn't stop. Then there was loud knocking. With a sigh, Sebastian stood up. I'll get rid of them. Don't move. Isabella smiled. I'll be right here. As Sebastian walked to the door, Isabella stared at the ring, her heart full of happiness. After everything she had been through, she had finally found something real with Sebastian. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear the voices at first. But then, they grew louder. She stood up and walked toward the front door. You have no right to be here, Sebastian said angrily. Leave now. Not before I talk to my wife, a man's voice replied. Isabella froze. That voice, she stepped into the doorway and saw him. He looked thinner, but still had that same arrogant look. Gabriel Blackwood. "Hello, Isabella," he said with a cold smile. "You look well." Isabella's voice shook. "How are you here? You're supposed to be in prison." "Released on appeal," Gabriel said smoothly. "My new lawyers found mistakes in the case against me. I'm free, for now." Sebastian stepped in front of Isabella, his arm around her. "Leave, Blackwood. Isabella doesn't want to see you." Gabriel's eyes narrowed as he looked at Sebastian. "Is that true, Isabella? Did you replace me so quickly?" Anger replaced Isabella's fear. "Don't you dare talk to him like that. Sebastian is twice the man you'll ever be." Gabriel's smile vanished. "Well, we still have things to discuss. Legal things. We're still married." Isabella felt like she had been hit. In all the chaos of running, hiding, and then falling in love with Sebastian, she had never divorced Gabriel. "I think it's time for you to go," Sebastian said, stepping closer. "Isabella will contact you through her lawyer." Gabriel smirked. "Her lawyer? You mean our lawyer? Half of everything she has is mine, including any money she gets from Whitaker's estate. Unless," he looked at Isabella, "unless you want to tell me where the rest of the money is?" "There is no money," Isabella said angrily. "I never had access to your accounts. You know that." Gabriel shrugged. "Yet somehow you've managed to live quite well." He glanced around at the beautiful house. "That's enough," Sebastian snapped. "Get out before I call the police." Gabriel raised his hands. "No need for that. I'll go." He pulled a business card from his jacket and held it out to Isabella. "When you're ready to talk, call my new lawyer, but don't wait too long. Doubt the press would love a story about a fraudster's wife moving on so quickly." He placed the card on the table. "Think about it, Isabella. You know how persuasive I can be." Then, with a cold smile, he walked out the door. The moment he left, Isabella's knees buckled. Sebastian caught her and helped her sit down. "He's out," she whispered, shaking. "He's really out." "It's okay," Sebastian said, kneeling in front of her. "He can't hurt you anymore." Isabella looked at him, fear in her eyes. "You don't know Gabriel. He never lets go of what he thinks is his." "We'll call Javier in the morning," Sebastian said. "He'll help with the divorce and anything else." Isabella nodded, but the happiness from earlier was gone. The engagement ring sat forgotten on the table. Sebastian took her hands. "Hey, look at me. Nothing has changed. I love you. Gabriel can't take that away." Isabella tried to smile. "I love you too. That's why I'm scared. Everyone I've ever loved, I've lost. My parents, my friends, I can't lose you too." "You won't," Sebastian promised. "We're in this together." That night, Isabella barely slept. Every little sound made her tense. Sebastian held her close, even in his sleep. At dawn, she slipped out of bed and went downstairs. She needed coffee. To her surprise, Javier was already there, sitting at the kitchen counter with his laptop. "Javier, what are you doing here so early?" "Sebastian called me," Javier said. "Told me about Gabriel's visit," Isabella sighed, pouring coffee. "Of course he did. He's worried about you. So am I. Gabriel is dangerous. What can we do?" she asked, sitting down. Javier turned his laptop to show her something. "The good news, Gabriel's release is temporary. He will go back to prison." "And the bad news?" "Your divorce won't be simple," Javier said. "Without a prenup, he could claim half of what you own." Isabella groaned. "Legally, I don't own much. Everything here belongs to Sebastian." "That's not the point," Javier said. "Gabriel doesn't want money from you. He wants the money he hid before his arrest." Isabella shook her head, then stopped. "Wait, we had a vacation house in the Berkshires. Gabriel bought it as a surprise for our anniversary. It was in my name. He said he used it for business." Javier's eyes lit up. "Was it taken when he was arrested?" "I don't know," Isabella admitted. "I never thought about it." "I'll look into it," Javier said, typing quickly. Sebastian walked in, looking tired. "I see Javier's caught you up. Good. I've arranged for extra security here and a bodyguard for you." "A bodyguard?" Isabella protested. "That's too much." "It's not enough," Sebastian said firmly. "Gabriel threatened you. I won't take chances." Javier's phone rang. He answered, listening seriously. Understood. We'll be careful. He hung up. That was my contact at the FBI. Gabriel made bail, but there's more. Whitaker was found dead in his cell. Sebastian frowned. Suicide? That's what they say, but they're investigating, Javier said. Before he died, he left a note saying he and Gabriel hid millions in cryptocurrency. If Gabriel has access to that money, Isabella felt cold. He could disappear forever. But not before he tries to get revenge, Javier added. Sebastian's phone buzzed. Security is here. They want to go over the plan. The next few days passed in a blur. Isabella hated having a bodyguard follow her. Sebastian was busy fixing problems at work. Javier found out the vacation house had been missed when Gabriel was arrested. And now Gabriel knew it was in her name. 5 days after Gabriel's visit, Isabella made a big decision. She found Sebastian in his office, looking at some papers. I need to go to the vacation house, she said quickly. Sebastian looked up, surprised. Now? In the middle of winter? If Gabriel hid anything important, it would be there, Isabella explained. Javier thinks so too, and I can't keep living like this, always scared, waiting for Gabriel to do something. Sebastian put down his pen. It's too dangerous, let the FBI handle it. They need a special paper to search the house, and that could take days. Gabriel might be watching them, but he might not be watching me as closely, Isabella said. He thinks I'm too afraid to do anything. Sebastian understood. You want to trick him, he said. Isabella nodded. I go to the house to pick up some things. If Gabriel follows me, the FBI can catch him. It's too risky, Sebastian said, shaking his head. It's our best chance, Isabella argued. I want to be free of Gabriel. I want to start my life with you. She stepped closer, placing her hands on his chest. I want to say yes to your proposal. Sebastian's face softened. You were going to say yes? Isabella smiled. I still am, once this is finished. Sebastian kissed her, holding her tightly. Okay, he finally agreed, but I'm coming with you. 2 days later, their plan was ready. The FBI knew what was happening and were waiting to help. Isabella and Sebastian, along with their bodyguard Davis and another security officer, drove 3 hours to the vacation house. They made sure they were seen, even stopping for lunch in a crowded place. The house was a beautiful lodge among snowy pine trees. Davis checked outside while Isabella unlocked the door. Inside, the house was cold but clean, taken care of by a cleaning service. Isabella walked through the rooms, remembering when she thought her marriage was real. She sighed. Gabriel always kept things in his office. Sebastian followed her. Where would he hide something important? Isabella thought hard. The safe behind that painting. Sebastian pulled the painting away. There was a locked safe. Do you know the code? Isabella shook her head. Try my birthday. Sebastian entered the numbers. Nothing happened. Our anniversary? He suggested. That didn't work either. Isabella frowned. The day we met. Gabriel always said it was his luckiest day. Sebastian typed the date. A soft beep sounded. The safe unlocked. Inside was a small USB drive and some papers. Isabella grabbed them, her hands shaking. This could be it, she whispered. Just then, Davis ran into the room. Someone's coming. A black SUV. Sebastian looked out the window. It's him. Gabriel. The FBI will be here in 3 minutes, Davis said. We need to stall him. Isabella took a deep breath. I'll talk to him. Isabella, no, Sebastian protested. It's too dangerous. Trust me, she said. I know how to handle Gabriel. She stepped outside just as Gabriel got out of his car. He smiled at her. Isabella, I thought you might come here. It's over, Gabriel, she called. I found everything. Gabriel's smile faded. Found what? Isabella held up the USB drive. Your secret accounts, the money, the FBI is coming. Gabriel's face darkened. Give that to me, now. Isabella stepped back. Or what? You'll hurt me like you hurt Whitaker? Gabriel climbed the steps toward her. I didn't kill Hugo. He was no longer useful. But you, Isabella, you're still useful to me. Don't come closer, Isabella warned, gripping the USB tightly. Gabriel's face twisted in anger. I never lose, he shouted, lunging at her. The door behind Isabella flew open. Sebastian rushed out. At the same time, sirens wailed in the distance. Gabriel froze, then turned to run. Gabriel Blackwood, an FBI agent called through a megaphone. You are under arrest. Get on the ground. Gabriel hesitated, then slowly raised his hands. He knelt in the snow as FBI agents swarmed him, handcuffing him. He never looked back at Isabella. She felt Sebastian's arms wrap around her. He whirred. It's really over, she whispered, watching Gabriel get taken away. It's over, Sebastian confirmed. Then he turned her to face him and pulled something from his pocket. It was the small velvet box from before. He knelt in the snow, opening it to show the diamond ring. I'm asking you again, he said, with no interruptions this time. Will you marry me? Isabella felt truly free for the first time. Free to love, free to dream, free to start a new life with Sebastian. Tears of joy filled her eyes. Yes, she said, I will marry you. Sebastian slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, kissing her as the winter sun broke through the clouds, shining golden light on the snowy ground. It was a new beginning, a love built on truth, trust, and understanding. Thanks for watching. If you liked the story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Check out our other videos too. See you in the next one.